information economy has arrived. The world is teeming with innovation as new business models reinvent every industry. InsideAnalysis is your source of information and insight about how to make the most of this exciting new era. Learn more at InsideAnalysis.com.
InsideAnalysis.com.
And now, here's your host, Eric Kavanaugh.
You're so blind, you go there in your mind. Welcome to the future right time.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome back once again. Welcome to the future indeed. As my favorite futurist, William Gibson, would say, the future is here already. It's just not evenly distributed, at least not yet. So that's what we're talking about today is customer experience, actually. This is a very fun topic. We have two great guests for you today, Maribel Lopez from Lopez Research, and Jenni Palocsik from a company called Verint. They're both experts in customer experience. So what is customer experience? It is what it sounds like. It's the experience you have as a customer working with a particular brand. And I thought of a fun story today to give a bit of a metaphor to describe what we're talking about. I went bowling over the weekend with the family. It was a lot of fun. And when we went to sign up, we gave them our information, 3 people bowling. They took our phone number and said, okay, we're going to text you a link. And then you can check on that link to see where you are in the queue. And it's great because it's dynamic. So when you click it first, there are, let's say, 12 people in front of you, but you can see their names, how many people are in the party, Jenny party of 2, Fred party of 4, etc. And at least you know where you are in the queue. And then it automatically updates. So anytime you click that link, it's going to show you the current state of the queue and where you are in that queue. So this is good customer experience because now I have this information and it's great. It's real world transactional data. Who's in front of me? How long is it going to take roughly? And of course, over time, you can go back as a venue and examine that data. So you can see, hey, when Bob's running the front desk and Susie's working the back room, everything is great. When Fred's working it, not so much. This is great from a business perspective and also from a customer perspective because the business knows what works and what doesn't. You can track things with real data. You know how much time it takes. It's not just an estimate. And you can learn over time. So you can optimize your business, you optimize the experience. And that's just one small example. Obviously, what we'll talk about today is really the nexus of all these different technologies, analytics, artificial intelligence, big data, and also some research. So Verint recently went out and did some research done. It's very, very interesting stuff. And with that, let's bring in our first guest, Jenni Palocsik from Verint. So first of all, tell us a little bit about yourself and Verint and what you're doing to improve the customer experience.
Thanks, Eric. I am Vice President of Insights, Experience, and Enablement. So my job is really to understand what's going on with our customers, but also with employees. We also focus in on enablement. So a lot of my work is setting expectations. So understanding what the data is telling us, and then from the data, making decisions. So a lot of our recent research is something we'd love to talk to you all about today.
Yeah, and I love this concept, the engagement capacity gap. So this report is out now. It just come out recently. And it really talks about what the users you surveyed are saying is their experience. What are some of the things that you wanted to accomplish when you engaged this research project?
Well, we first did it about a year ago. A year into the pandemic, we thought companies are really struggling. We wanted to understand what their experience was engaging with their consumers. So we asked about 2,700 business leaders who were involved in customer engagement, decision-making, and purchasing, what their experience was. And what we found was that the expectations of their customers was a lot higher than the organization's ability to respond to it. And that, in a sense, is engagement capacity gap. And we thought it was really important to understand what they were facing. And then we repeated again this year, knowing that we're 2 years in. A lot of consumers are impatient. They want to know that organizations have figured it out. So we repeated the research and got a lot of great findings the second year. New workforce dynamics, new technology, new strategies.
Yeah, and there's a lot of new stuff going on out there. Hybrid work, for example, we're coming out of the pandemic, knock on wood, thank goodness. But you're not just going to change back, right? We'll talk to Maribel Lopez about that later on in the show. But very serious changes have taken place. I mean, one of the things I heard is that a lot of the predictive models that were used by online retailers went out the window because behavior changed and those models were trained on old behavior. So the pandemic caused all sorts of trouble, one of which was really upsetting the apple cart of how people behave, right?
Yeah, it's been really interesting to watch different industries respond. And I think most industries were struggling at first to understand how could they, still engage their customers, still drive commerce. The travel industry was one of the ones that was hit the most. We'll talk a little bit later about the Engagement Preparedness Index, the EPI, as we like to call it, and different industries, what they invested in, how they pivoted and changed over the last 2 years. The ones that did it well, that acted, that tried new things, they're the ones that are doing better moving forward. It's really a competitive market out there, even more so now.
Yeah, sure. And this concept of empathy comes up a lot. And I've done the conference circuit for years in this industry, and that's been a hot topic for at least the last 5 to 7 years, and meaning wanting your employees to show empathy to the customers, for example. But if that is going to happen, then you also need the employees to feel like management is showing empathy to them, right? It's not just a one directional or unidirectional scenario, right? You want everyone involved to keep this in mind and then help it shape how they respond and how they work every day, right?
Yeah, that was actually one of the top findings of this year's research. 91% of the survey respondents said that they were investing in technology to either assess or improve the empathy that their employees and their customers both had. But you bring up the good side of you have to be empathetic to your employees so they can in turn be empathetic to their customers. You can't just look at one side of it.
Yeah, that's right. And one of the stats that jumped out at me is that 76% of business leaders believe customer engagement challenges will increase. And just to throw some context around that, customer engagement takes lots of different forms, but it's pretty simple stuff. You get right down to it. You have point of sale where something is happening. You have customer support over the phone. You have chatbots. There are different ways you can encounter and deal with customers. And you want to understand which ones want to be reached out how. This is called channel management. Some people like a direct message. Some people want a phone to be called. Some people like direct mail. And the better you know your preferences of your customers, the better off you can treat them, the better off you can route their communications through those appropriate channels, right, Jenni?
Mm-hmm. It is. It's important to know what your customers want. And I think we're finding that customers don't like picking just one. They want to be able to have a lot of flexibility in how they interact with the brands that they love. And when they're struggling, they might reach out to you on the website and then on the phone and then by chat. So understanding how all of those connect together is really important.
Yeah, and being able to weave a cohesive strategy around that with your messaging to be able to leverage that and have that information available to a customer service person. I mean, these sound like simple things, but behind the scenes, it can be pretty challenging to pull that off. But you want to know, for example, when the person does call, typically that's going to be an escalation, especially if they're usually on the website or on text messages on their phone or something, and they call, it's like, oh, they're serious now. And if you have that information, that history, then the customer service person can jump right to it and figure out what's going on. They say, I see you, we're on the website. Is that what you're calling about? These are little bits and pieces when it comes together that really help improve the customer experience and keep the customer happy, right?
Yeah, it really is. And I think if you can anticipate why someone's calling, sometimes you can suggest an answer to the question that customers often have after they've had an experience. I think it's being smart about artificial intelligence and, what are the perceived or likely intents someone has when they're chatting with you, when they mention certain words. There's so much technology out there that it's not technology for technology's sake, but being smart about how and when you use different methodologies.
Yeah, that's right. Well, let's bring in our other guest here. We have Maribel Lopez from Lopez Research. I've known Maribel for quite a few years now, and she's a real expert in this space. We're very pleased to have her on board to help us understand this stuff today. So Maribel, first tell us a bit about yourself and how you are working to help improve customer experience.
Sure. So I'm Maribel Lopez. I'm the founder of Lopez Research and also a nonprofit called Data for Betterment. The nonprofit focuses on helping people understand how technology will change the future of work, which really fits quite square into this. But at Lopez Research, I help people understand, what kind of business value certain technologies will bring. And the thing I think is really interesting right now is we used to have this separate, here's the customer experience and here's the employee experience. Mm-hmm. And now the beauty of what we're trying to do is really understanding that you can't have a good customer engagement without great employee experience. So that's some of the research I'm working on now is trying to figure out how we move into hybrid distributed work, how that changes engagement, and how technology can enable that.
Yeah, and future of work, I often joke, is the present of work, right? There's this concept we throw out there, the future of work, but really we're talking about what's happening right now, and yes, what's going to be changing. But the big change, I think, has taken place, and that is that we now see lots and lots of jobs are work from home. Lots of jobs people thought or said couldn't be done from home. Guess what? They can be done from home. We've seen it happen. And I think it's interesting. I think we joked before the show that you were saying you don't think it's going to be going back to normal ever. And I think you're probably right about that. And so that really speaks to the clarion call to business people, figure it out soon, right? Figure out how hybrid work is going to work for your organization. What can you leverage? I think, COVID as a forcing function was very interesting because now we all are much more aware and cognizant of our gaps, right? And this report I love is the engagement capacity gap. Knowing where those gaps are is like the first step to solving a problem, right? Or building a bridge.
Well, I think the gaps have also changed. I mean, I think that you mentioned COVID and how COVID was a forcing function for a lot of things. And I'm sure, 50 years from now, we're going to be writing textbooks that say that. But if we really think about it, some of the things that changed actually made the capacity gap worse. So, and we have technology to alleviate that, but let's unpack that a little bit, because you were just talking about this concept of engagement not being the same. So one of the things that we saw was we moved from an environment where maybe some people were more phone-based, maybe some people were more messaging-based, but basically everybody went to some format of digital for at least some percentage of time. And that meant your customers too. What happened when we got to the point where everybody went digital? Not everybody did digital evenly across organizations. So unfortunately for most companies, what's happened now is that customers have now grown to expect a great experience that mirrors the ease of digital no matter what channel they're in, whether they're walking into your store, whether they're calling you on the phone, whether they're having a live chat with you. They expect that consistency of data and information. They're actually benchmarking you against this theoretical Acme Corp that's the best of everything. So if their bank does something well, they expect you're going to do it as well as their bank does it. If a retailer does something well, they expect you're going to do it that way. And that's really difficult. So that actually, back to the part where you were talking about the people that said they thought it was going to get more complex. I think that that's what they're feeling right now. And then that means that it actually gets more complex for the people that are serving those customers. So now they're expected to know more about more products. They're expected, because we've introduced some interesting digital technologies such as virtual agents and better ways to access information and services digitally and do self-service. Now, when they actually talk to an agent, it's much more complex what they're trying to do. Yeah. And the other big change is the engagement itself. We're actually asking people to move beyond just support. It's support with empathy, but it's also advice, cross-sell, upsell. It's full on customer experience engagement, like taking the customer through an entire life cycle of sales through support. And I think that that's a very different way of thinking about it, because it's not just anything could happen in any channel, to your point. It's not nicely siloed the way it used to be, and you have to be prepared to support that.
That's really interesting. Jenni, I'd like to bring you in real quick to comment on something, because I got a great idea as Maribel was talking here. Maribel, not Maribel. Which is we have so much more data now to understand each part of that journey, right? There's the onboarding, there's the initial discovery, there's the onboarding, there's the nurturing, there's post-purchase, for example. There are all these different steps. And now, especially with e-commerce being so robust and so much information available by which channel they came through, what they clicked on, where they went, all that analysis is great. So you can improve each component part. You can figure out, hey, we're good at getting people to the store. We're just not so good at getting them to buy things. And so now you can really focus your efforts on optimizing the parts that need help, right, Jenni?
You can. And I think it's important to use that data to make those improvements, because each customer experience is going to be somewhat different and their expectations are going to be different. You don't have a one-size-fits-all customer, just like you don't have a one-size-fits-all experience. So I think having that data and really analyzing it to know what's going on does let you make specific improvements at different steps in that journey.
Yeah, and lots of people can get the data too. Maribel, I'll bring you back in to comment on that. You can feed that data, that analysis, to anyone on the team, to the operations people, to the senior executives, to whoever up and down the value chain. And the more that appropriate information is shared, the better off the whole experience is for everyone, right?
Yes, I think what's happened in the past is we were in an environment where data was very isolated for whatever reasons. It was isolated. Now we're talking about building data-driven cultures and data-driven ecosystems within organizations, but also across organizations. So some of the people that are best in class have managed to break down their internal data silos, integrate data into their applications and workflows, and now are even connecting with third-party data to enhance their offerings. But it is definitely a journey where first you have to get to the point where you have all of your data, it's accurate, it lives wherever it needs to live, but you can still do analysis on it. But more importantly, data, if you have to go to it in some dashboard, is fairly useless. You need data within the context of the applications and the workflows that you're using. You need to be able to act on that data. That data can actually come in more than a format of numbers. One of the things that I think is very powerful, particularly as we talk about customer engagement right now, is this concept of predictive, guided next best actions. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to give people the information. Earlier we talked about anticipating what the customer was going to call about. Well, if we can anticipate what the next engagement is, then there's sort of a logical set of paths that you could probably go down that the person that's responsible for the engagement at that time may or may not think of themselves, but technology can help guide them through this.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And that gets into this concept of intent. And we'll talk about that later in the show. But being able to ascertain intent is really important, because if you know someone wants to buy something, okay, let's give them an interesting offer. If you know someone wants to complain about something, let's give them our most empathetic customer service rep to talk to them and talk them back off the cliff, for example. If you know the intent, that really helps shape what you do next. And that way you don't give just a garden variety offering to everyone. You don't do a one size fits all. You can do very highly customized offerings in real time when someone's on your website, when someone's on the phone, when someone's in the store even, to change the trajectory and optimize the interaction. We'll be right back, folks. Don't touch that dial. You're listening to Inside Analysis.
Welcome back to Inside Analysis. Here's your host, Eric Kavanaugh.
Take us to the future.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, take us to the future indeed. It is hurtling towards us at all times. It's always fun now. And we get closer and closer to real time, right? Real time is a big deal. It's a big part of preparedness. And I wanted to talk with our guests. We have Jenni Palocsik of Verint and Maribel Lopez of Lopez Research about this new report that has just come out. Well, it's a really interesting report that goes into how organizations are evolving to address new challenges in 2022, the engagement capacity gap. And there's the part of this which is called the Engagement Preparedness Index, or EPI. And Jenni Palocsik of Verint, I'd love you to kind of walk us through this. What is the Engagement Preparedness Index and how can it help?
So the Engagement Preparedness Index is a multidimensional index. It has three main factors, and it's essentially, what is the solution state at the organization? How prepared does that business leader feel they are based on that solution state? And what are their planned investments for the coming year? So it's a combination of looking back and then how comfortable that business leader is in how they're going to be able to meet the needs of their customers coming up in the next 12 months.
Yeah, and there are lots of different technologies to leverage. It really just kind of depends upon your particular business model. I mean, obviously travel was in the crosshairs during the pandemic. And what was cool, maybe I'll get your thoughts on this and Maribel's as well. What was cool is that it forced these organizations into a whole new set of actions for issues like vouchers, for example. In fact, in the last show in this podcast series, we were talking to Evan Kirstel, and he was talking about how the airlines very quickly went from refunding people to giving them vouchers because they realized that we're just sending all this money out the door. Cash is just flying out the window, so to speak. But if we use vouchers, then we can at least stop that hemorrhaging. Yeah, we have to provide a service later on, but at least it isn't an immediate outflow of cash. Well, what a brilliant way to solve a very pressing challenge, because with COVID, guess what? Travel went sideways, the entire industry, and now they're kind of clawing back. But I guess the fun part of it, I'll throw this over to you, Jenni, is that it really did spur a lot of really good innovation around customer experience, around knowing what's possible, knowing where the gap is, all that fun stuff. It really came to a head and I think spun out some great innovation. What do you think, Jenni?
I think it did. I think when the pandemic first hit, everyone went digital because they had to. It was kind of a survival approach. But as it kept going, organizations had to learn how to pivot. How are they going to interact with their customers? One of the things in the travel industry, a lot of organizations use messaging. So the ability to not just know that someone's going to miss a flight because of bad weather, but to anticipate that, reach out to the customer and say, hey, do you want to reschedule your flight? So there's a lot of really cool technology that's now out there that you can use in really smart ways.
Yeah, that is such a good example. And maybe I'll get you to comment on it real quick before you go back to Maribel. But I remember when I first saw that, when I got a text from my phone saying your flight is going to be delayed past your time. Do you want to reschedule now? And what a wonderful service to offer, to where I can just click on the link, choose my next flight, and be done with it. Not only does it save me time, it saves the company time. Because if you call, especially when there's a storm rolling in and things change, you get all these people calling in. It's a real chaotic experience. And the companies that do well in that kind of environment, they're going to do very well, because people will remember in a crisis who was there for them and who wasn't. Right, Jenni?
Yeah, it's that delight, that amount of experience that you can provide to someone. They might not have been expecting it, but you made their lives so much easier. And that loyalty is a big step.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'll throw it over to Maribel, because I think we can all get excited about that when the airline starts saying, oh, no change fees. You can change anytime, buy it now, change it anytime. I was like, yeah, let's keep these protocols in place, guys. I love this. I love the new world of travel. What do you think, Maribel?
I want to pull it back to employee experience, because let's talk a little bit about how that change actually really helped the business.
Yeah.
It helped the customers, and by helping the business, it could help the customers. So if you look at what was happening to contact center agents in any field, they were getting swarmed, absolutely crushed with volume, demoralized, the whole thing. When you start to do, and that's a real problem, because if you get the demoralized staff, they leave. If they leave, it's very difficult for you to get new people on board. If you get them on board, it's very difficult to get them up and running quickly. Yet you have crushing demand. It's actually a really difficult situation to be in. If you can find creative ways to service that need, and actually even service it better than, it was faster and easier for you to do that specific task on your mobile phone when you got off the plane, rather than sit and wait on hold and probably miss like 5 or 6 opportunities or be standing in a line, right? So you as an individual are delighted with the experience, but the company is also delighted because now they can actually deal with a bunch of other scenarios that are more complicated at that point in time. People that they can't get on a flight until maybe the next morning or 2 days from now, or other things that they need to deal with, right? And there were other examples of things that were small and delightful and useful. So, for example, banks that didn't allow mobile deposits all of a sudden started offering mobile deposits. So you didn't have to go to the bank. It didn't matter that the bank wasn't open. They changed the amount that you could use for mobile deposits, recognizing that maybe some people had slightly larger checks that they needed to put in. So there's all that kind of innovation that happened there. The other thing that was really great is I think we finally got to a point where we were starting to meet customers wherever they were. Mm-hmm. And this is where we broadened the definition of here's the 1 or 2 ways that you can deal with me. And we really started saying, hey, Some of you want to talk to us in your social messaging apps. Some of you want to talk to us on SMS. Some of you want to call. Some of you want to be on the web and do a live chat. I mean, there was like a lot of different ways you could do it at a lot of different times of the day. And I think that expectation that people were doing all kinds of crazy shifts in their schedules based on school, based on trying to fit in work. They did things at random hours. So how do you support that?
Right.
And how do you support it in a way that's scalable for a government, a small business, a large business, whatever size you were? You know, one of my clients actually had to do 140,000 inquiries a day about unemployment benefits.
Oh my goodness.
How do you do that? You've got to find a way to automate that somehow, right? So yeah, so you know that you didn't have enough people to support that. So I like the way that there's things that we could do technically that would help the people that do sales and support that also delighted the customers. And I think that was kind of the big win, meeting people where they were and making it faster for everybody and taking the low-hanging fruit off the table. So you didn't need to mess with the things that didn't require deep skill.
That's right. No, it's such a perfect example. And in this research, Jenni, I'll throw it over to you. There's another good stat that really jumps out. 84% of people polled said they plan to invest in technology to support the right mix of self-service and human-enabled engagement. That's what we're talking about. That allows you to send the automated text message. That allows you, it lets an airline allow the machines to tell us the data that then gets pushed out to the user. Hey, your flight's going to be delayed. Do you want to reschedule? Now it clicks on the link. It's a dynamic link. It gets me to a page where I can choose flights. That is self-service, which is great because I solved my own problem by myself. No person had to get on the phone, didn't have to wait in any line. Problem solved. I mean, it's just such a wonderful, talk about delight. I'll get 100% on board with the delight concept when that happens. And I now don't have to call and wait on some stupid thing, especially because some play music, some don't play music. It drives you crazy. You're like, where am I in this queue? It's very frustrating. And you just cut right through all that nonsense and solve the problem. Right, Jenni?
Yeah, and I think it's being intelligent about self-service or being intelligent about assisted service. There's nothing that drives me crazier than when I'm on the phone and I'm hearing the hold message and it says, oh, go to our website. We can solve your problems. And you go to the website and you have to start from scratch and get back on the phone. So, I think it's about understanding the intent of the customer. And usually you can do that based on what they've searched for or what are the steps that they've taken so far that technology-wise, so that there are some easy things that you can solve for them in a self-service way. But if it's more complex, then that transition, hopefully in an effortless way to an agent, to an employee to help them with the more complex needs, that's the best of both worlds. You don't want the easy ones to come in to have to deal with a human, but you want that human empathy there for the more complex customer service problems.
Yeah. And the data everywhere helps immensely, and it helps to understand what the workflows are. Right? And the thing is, Maribel, I'll throw this over to you. Smart companies are already trying to innovate. Smart companies were trying to innovate before COVID hit. So they were prepared. We talked about this engagement preparedness index. If you can kind of understand where you are in the marketplace, that can help your decision makers, your CIO, your VPs, your directors of IT, all these people better prioritize and better understand what do we need to work on. And I've always found that the more open you are with data, the more open you are with your reasons for things, the better off everyone's going to feel. All your employees will understand if you're like, look, here's the bottom line and we're below it right now. We have to figure something out to get back up that line. And the more transparent you are with your staff, the more involved they are, the more you listen to them, the better off everyone's going to feel. And that's good for morale. People can get through the hardest times as long as they feel like there's a purpose and they're doing something to help the problem. And that happens if they have the information and they are being heard, right, Maribel?
Yeah. One of the things I think is really interesting to that point that you're making is if we think about empathy. Empathy is kind of a difficult word, right? Because in a lot of ways, I think the people that are engaging with the customers just feel like they're a number and the customer's a number, right?
Right.
So how do we get out of them feeling like they're a number, and how do we get out of them feeling that the customer's a number? And that's like reconnecting with your why as an organization. What you're doing, why you're doing it, who it serves, right? And this gets to the concept of, you talked about data silos, having more having a more complete view of the customer. The customer is Maribel. She's a person. She's doing this. She needs that. These are the type. She's struggled with the same question 5 times when she's calling in. She's probably really frustrated, right? So there's. But if you don't have that previous context of interactions with a person, it's very difficult for you to, you're coming into it new the first time. One of the things I really like about what we can do with technology right now is it eliminates some of the original frustration of actually, who is this person? What services do they have? Basically, people can come to the table with much more knowledge about the customer. That makes it better for them, like in their mindset of how they're going to serve somebody. And it also makes it better for the customer. It eliminates that frustration of, I've given everybody my account number 5 times. I've been bounced to 5 different people. It's like, we shouldn't be bouncing you to 5 different people. We shouldn't have to make you do this 5 different times. And the person that is engaging with you should have some sense of, what do we need to do? And if we have to figure it out on the fly, there's even stuff that helps guide you in terms of artificial intelligence, in terms of figuring out on the fly, in terms of sentiment analysis, in terms of that next best action, in terms of other things that you could offer. There's also a sense of empowerment that I think that we need to try to create in these experiences. And having the right data can actually get you to a state where the people that are supporting the customers, whether they're in the field or on the phone, can actually say, hey, this is something that might be good for you, and be much more prescriptive about the guidance. Because while we all want to give our customers choice, sometimes customers just want a narrow set of potential answers to choose from, and somebody that knows how to describe them. So you have to be able to have the narrow set of answers delivered quickly via the data. You have to be able to have the information about what those different answers mean available to the agent. And, not everything has to be so super scripted is the other thing. So how do we get people to the point where you don't feel like they're reading the card, you are a very valued customer? Does anybody feel valued when you say that? Nobody feels valued. So, or due to the COVID-19 pandemic, call time. I mean, okay, it's been 2 years, people, get over it. Like, you've got to find a way to make call hold times lower. So, so it's stuff like that we are working on, and that I think AI can be truly helpful in this human machine partnership way, as opposed to, I think everybody originally thought it was like, oh, well, this will help us replace people. It's like, oh, no. That's not what this is about. Frankly, we need more people than we ever did, right? So it's not about that. It's about, how do we make the people we have more effective, more efficient, feel like they know what they're doing, and that they can do it well and get to the next step. And I think that's the power of technology today.
Yeah, that's amazing stuff too. And you're right. And you have to remember, a lot of these issues are fairly small, but can be handled. And so you look at chatbots, for example, and I think there were some examples of chatbots that came out a bit prematurely. The technology wasn't quite ready for prime time, and they wound up just irritating people. You don't want to do that. But chatbots done well can solve sometimes 80% or more of the messages that come in. When are you open? Do you have this product? Is this service still available? I mean, you see this in like Facebook, for example, when you go to the marketplace, they give you a question to ask. Is this available? They're trying to facilitate that process whereby the transaction gets done. And so if you think outside the box, there are so many ways to address. Again, is it that we need more customers? Is it that we need better customer service? Is it that we need better products? Is it that we need more people? Is it that we need people to have better training? All these different things can come together to reshape what the organization does, but you have to start with who you are. And Maribel mentioned that, your DNA. Who are you, really? And then your customers, who are they? What do you do well? That should drive the entire process of reinvention. Don't touch that dial, folks. We'll be right back. You're listening to Inside Analysis.
Welcome back to Inside Analysis. Here's your host, Eric Kavanaugh.
All right, folks, welcome back to Inside Analysis. We're talking today all about the engagement capacity gap. How can you close that gap? How can you do more? How can you engage more efficiently with your customers and, of course, with your employees? And we're talking about data and the role that data plays. We've got Maribel Lopez of Lopez Research, and we have Jenni Palocsik of Verint on the line. And Maribel, I'll throw it over to you. Every piece of data is an opportunity, right? Every piece of data can share something about a workflow, a process, a person, an idea, a product, whatever. So any piece of data can start the thought process and lead to good actions, right?
Yeah. So one of the things that we have seen is that there is data that helps the agent, and that makes a lot of sense, right? There are automatic things that you can do, such as tracking the call records and other things, automatic transcription and things of that nature. But what do you find out as a business from that? The thing I think a lot about is, okay, so we now have information that tells you if there's something wrong with your process. If the process isn't working, if somebody changed something and all of a sudden that worked better, you can actually get a good handle on, does your process work? The other thing that's interesting is you can have really interesting insight on whether or not there's an issue with your product. If N number of people call with a similar issue, all of a sudden you're like, oh, perhaps that's an opportunity to change our product. You can also do better workforce management. It's like, oh, people that solve things this way get off the phone and help first call resolution 50% more, right? So it's not just even about how long somebody's on the phone. It's about whether or not they've actually addressed the problem. So there's lots of ways we can think of data. And I think what we had, we've always had data. What we really haven't done is taken that data, taken the analysis of that data to the next level and fed it back into our processes and workflows to change how business gets done, to change our product categories, to find ways to increase our revenue. There's lots of interesting insights that we can create now, and I'm very excited for that opportunity.
Yeah, and you want it to start with the data. So I'll throw it over to Jenni. To Maribel's point, there's all this data that you can get. The question is, what do you do with it, right? And if you have a bunch of messages coming in about this product and people seem to be unhappy, well, maybe there was something wrong with the product. And the point is, you can analyze any of these bits and really have your teams focus on whether it's delivery or product design or whatever, but get them the data, as much of it as you can, so they can better understand the context, because a lot gets lost in translation, right? So you want to share the data and have everyone have their ownership in the data that matters for them, and let that data start the processes. Let that data be the foundation for everything you do in the organization. What do you think, Jenni?
I think you need to. I mean, there's so many data silos. I mean, when we talk to organizations, that's usually one of the first things they say. Oh, we've got so much data. What do we do with it all? Right now, it's in so many different pockets of the organization. So oftentimes the experience data is over here in this warm, fuzzy place. And then you've got the interaction data where people are trying to actually solve customer service issues. And really, you got to bring them together. So how do you understand what someone is doing and how the employee is interacting with those customers to deliver that customer experience? I think there's a lot of really powerful predictive and artificial intelligence that can assess what's going on in that call to say, oh, here we have these trends that are appearing. It isn't something I already set up as a speech analytics category, but it's something that is emerging. So how do I, as a contact center, make adjustments on the fly to what's going on? How do I share that information? And even when you have agents, you have employees that are struggling, you want to be able to understand that and help them. So sometimes it's when there's extra long hold times. Well, is it that they're struggling because they don't have the knowledge to answer the question? So sometimes that means more coaching, more tools to help them. Are they talking over the customer? Is that, bad experience for the employee and the customer? So can you get a supervisor to intervene? I think there's so many things that we could be doing smarter with data and really empower that decision making. I love all the examples that you provided, Maribel, and that you did, Eric. It's really powerful if you use it in the right way.
Yeah, and I'll throw this over to you, Maribel, and I think you kind of hinted at this too. At least you're talking about channels. And with data, it's the same thing. You always need context, right? One data point by itself can be very misleading. And I'll give you an example. Long call times. Let's say we're dealing with a call center and you have one person, Julie, who has lots of long calls. That doesn't mean she's bad. You have to match that against the other data, which says, oh, look at that. 90% of the people are highly satisfied and she does upsells all the time. That's because people like talking to her. Now, there may be someone else with long calls and they're just not long because they're not doing it right because they can't find the information. These are very different scenarios with the same data point describing them. So you always have to look at the context to kind of figure out where it fits in the workflow in that situation. And that's when you can really figure stuff out. Let's get this lady a raise instead of firing her. What do you think, Maribel?
Yeah, I think we have to rethink the way we judge engagement, right? We're trying to build engagement, not transaction. And that's a big difference. So transaction is like boom, boom, boom. I get you in, I get you out, I'm on to the next thing, right? Engagement is about who are you? What do you need? How do I serve you better? How do I create something where you're going to be loyal and keep coming back? And that typically does not equate to throwing somebody off of their channel of choice, be that a live chat or a person or even a bot, right? So what I think we really need to think about is we need to redo the metrics. What's the metric we're actually looking at, right? How are we increasing the lifetime value of the customer? How are we increasing NPS? Okay, we've got average call hold times. Obviously, you don't want those to be very long, but that doesn't mean that you're optimizing for them to be as short as possible. So I think you need to kind of keep the eye on the prize and match it back to your key metrics. There are years where it's like, hey, this year it's all about increasing sales. So maybe that gets to the metric that you're getting your customer sales and support on is like, how are we improving and increasing sales within these different channels, right? Another year it could be like, hey, we've gotten terrible customer support numbers. What do we do to fix that? Some of it can be fixing the product. Some of it can be saying, okay, we need to spend more time on the phone, making sure that we get them to first call resolution and that their problem is fixed, not just, patched, or they'll call back later, or they're frustrated and hang up. So different years may require different metrics, but none of them are saying that you're going to treat this as a transactional thing. We're talking about the engagement capacity gap, which means where you're trying to drive engagement, not transactions. And that's a big difference. You're not a website. You're a company.
Yeah. What a good point. Yeah, Jen, I'll get you to comment on that. It's a brilliant distinction. You have to know what you're trying to accomplish and then set out programs to do so and then measure them and be as neutral minded as you can through that whole process, right, Jenny?
Yeah, and I think the examples Maribel gave are good ones because you can't look at just one metric. So is it average handle time? Well, yes and no. How does that also map with the first contact resolution or the customer experience? And, I think success rates of engaging customers, really measuring their loyalty. You're going to have some people that are transactional, but most of the time they want you to not rush them off the phone. They'll sense that, as soon as you start.
And if they're transactional, they're going to a bot, right? So that's the easy stuff. Like by the time they get to you, it's like they need to engage for some reason.
Yeah, right. Something else is broken that they would have done self-serve, but they can't.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. And I think you have to set realistic targets and try to move the needle in realistic ways. I'll throw it over to you, Jenny, for some closing comments here. Don't try to do too much too fast. Try to understand one particular significant challenge. Why are call times so long? It's a very simple one. And just try to focus in on that, understand it, and then start taking actions that you can measure, right?
Yeah, I think it's about evaluating and assessing, knowing what's going on with your customers, with your employees. It's not a one size fits all, even within your organization. You're going to have some customers that need something different than other customers. So, I think it's being smart about the technology you use and applying it in the right ways so that you have loyal customers. You retain the ones you have and you grow the base. That's really what this is all about.
Yeah, and just to kind of mirror what Maribel said earlier, Maribel, see, I'm doing it now because of Encanto. I blame Encanto. I'm going back and forth. No, but seriously, you want happy employees when the morale is high on your employees. And if you've got someone having to bang out 140,000 texts in a day, that's not going to be a high morale employee. Real quick, Maribel.
Mm-hmm. From the employee standpoint, you got to make sure they have the right data. You got to make sure that you've given them the right metrics, and it is about engagement. So empowering them to do so.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And people like that. I can promise you, good customer service reps feel good when every call goes well. If one bad call will throw you off for a significant, you got to shake it off, walk down to the water cooler, do something else, figure it out, but just let it roll off your back like water off a duck. I've heard that many times. But when they do good work, people helping these customer service reps, they feel good about it and they go home happy. Their morale is high. The customer is happy. Everyone's happy. Podcast bonus segment up next. You're listening to Inside Analysis.